Привет всем! С вами я, Janie at College Russian. This is our live stream. Today we are going to not so much be looking at poetry, but we're going to take a Russian author, a very famous Russian author, Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. We're going to take some key quotes from his most famous novel, which is Crime and Punishment. So a lot of people I know actually became interested in Russian because of Dostoevsky. They had read his books in English and they wanted to be able to read them in the original Russian. Well, I'm warning you right now, Dostoevsky is very hard to read in Russian. So we'll take a look at some of that today. And at the end, the final quote I'm going to show you is an example of how long his sentences can be and all the grammar that's involved in them. But we'll break it down, and we're just going to kind of do an overview of the story of Преступление и наказание, Crime and Punishment. There will be some spoilers in here, so if you don't want to know how the story goes, then definitely maybe read the book first. Actually, I won't tell you everything in there. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk just a little bit about Dostoevsky. So I love, as many of you know, I love Russian literature. Dostoevsky is just he strikes me as a very sweet person. So he was born in 1820. This was around this time in Russia. There was a lot of talk about revolution. It was after there was a movement called the Decembrists. They were the people who had been to France and kind of seen the results of the French Revolution. And they came back to Russia and wanted to kind of have a revolution in Russia as well. Well, obviously the Tsar didn't like that. And so anybody who got too involved with this revolutionary type behavior or groups or thinking, a lot of times they were sent to labor camps. And so Dostoevsky himself was sentenced to a labor camp and was even sentenced to death and then was pardoned at the last minute. So a lot of his life experiences are about, he has an understanding of the common people, Biedные люди, which coincidentally is one of his book names, but he has an understanding of the more common people that somebody like Tolstoy didn't have as much of. Although, by the way, I have a love-hate relationship with Tolstoy. Maybe someday I'll talk about it. Anyway, so Dostoevsky is just he's very spiritual in his writing. A lot of talk about redemption. And again, we'll talk about that today in Crime and Punishment. If you have Amazon Prime, for a while there was this series. It was like The Life of Dostoevsky, and the acting was great. You can, if you have Amazon Prime, it used to be on there. I don't know if it still is, but I highly recommend checking that out. So real quick, let's talk about the premise of the book Преступление и наказание. The main character is a guy named Raskolnikov, and Dostoevsky uses what's called metonymy, meaning he likes to use names and words that have like a deeper meaning. And we're going to talk about the deeper meaning, even just in the word преступление. So Raskolnikov is a poor student. He's having a hard time paying his rent. And he gets it in his mind that he should kill his landlady and steal her money, and that all of society will be better off if he does this. So he thinks very highly of himself, and he considers himself to be a Napoleon, and we'll talk more about what that means. Napoleon is somebody who can get away with bad behavior. So then he meets a girl, Sonia Marmeladova, and she actually works as a prostitute to try and support her family. And so, he thinks that, he finds kind of a friend in her. He judges her to a certain degree, but he also thinks that she maybe wouldn't judge him because he's committed this crime. He killed his landlady. So anyway, they start up a friendship, and Sonia is going to be very important in his life at the end of the book. Anyway, so let's take a minute. I want to show you something super cool and he does end up killing his landlady because he thinks he is superior to everybody else and he can get away with it. But the big thing that I'm not going to spoil for is kind of how it ends. It ends in a pretty surprising way. So let's look at, no, I don't like that format. Let's see, there we go. So we're going to look starting with, and this is why a good motivation to learn Russian is even just to understand the name of the book, you kind of got to know Russian. Okay, so let's look at, we're going to do a quick word root study here. So the root stup means to step. Okay, and then if you guys have been watching my word root videos, you know that piri means across. So this literally means to step across. Okay, so then the word преступление comes from this verb. And this is the prefix, by the way. It's the same thing as пере, but in Old Church Slavonic. So those are interchangeable. And so преступление, the literal meaning of it is stepping across. Stepping across. When you commit a crime, you step across a socially accepted line, right? So yeah. So when you commit a crime, you're literally stepping across social norms, for example. Okay, so that's going to be very important in this story, is this concept of stepping across. And again, if you're only reading the English, you would never be able to appreciate this, because you wouldn't know that the word crime comes from the word to step across. And that's going to come in handy here in just a second when we read one of the quotes. Okay, so let's look at this. So, for example, мне надо было узнать тогда и поскорее узнать, вошь ли я, как все, или человек. Okay, so again, Raskolnikov, the герой, the main character, thinks he is superior. He thinks he is superior to everybody else, and that he should be allowed to get away with simple things. So he says, мне надо было. So to me, it was needed or necessary to find out then, and sooner find out. Vosh, this is a great word. I didn't even know this word before I read this book. I didn't realize that the word lice, like the little things in your hair, has a singular. I didn't even know that. That's crazy. But this is a louse. A louse is a singular lice. I honestly didn't even know that in English. Am I a louse? Like everyone? Or a person? Okay, so this is how he thinks. This is how the main character, Raskolnikov, thinks of pretty much everybody, is that they're lice. They're lousy. They're below him. They're disgusting creatures. Okay, so let's look at some of the grammar here. Мне, we've got dative case because of надо. Надо requires dative case. Было, this is how you say you needed in past tense. So this is the past of быть. So it was necessary. Узнать, that's just an infinitive verb. I needed to find out. And that's perfective, if you are interested to know about verbal aspect. И поскорее, this comes from the word скоро, but you can also turn it into скорее, meaning sooner. And then this is more literary, right? So you can also say поскорее. Вошь ли я, this is in the nominative, and it's a feminine. Так, как все. Okay, if this had two dots on the top, it would be everything. But without the two dots, it's everyone. It's everyone. So keep that in mind. If it has the two dots, if it's все, that means everything. If it doesn't have the two dots, it's everyone. Или человек. Okay, and then that's nominative, masculine. Okay, so he wants to find out. So I needed to find out then, and find out as fast as I could, whether I am a louse, whether I am a disgusting creature. Poor Harun, he's already trying to translate it and has already collapsed. Well, stay tuned, because I'll break it down to you for you, okay? But again, this is, you can see in the comments, Dostoevsky is very intimidating. But once you know Russian, the writing is so beautiful, and you can appreciate Dostoevsky on a deeper level, because he uses play on words a lot. Okay, so I needed to find out, and find out fast, whether I am a louse, a disgusting creature like everyone, or am I a person? So am I in fact better than everybody? Okay, let's keep going. Again, some spoiler alerts happening right here. Okay, here's that key word we just talked about, переступить. Very important for understanding this entire novel is this verb right here, okay? Смогу ли я переступить или не смогу? Okay, so can, Li just makes things into a question. I'll be releasing a video about this with my student Ilya pretty soon, and you can learn how to use this word li. It makes things into a question. So can I step across? Can I step across? Или не смогу, or can I not, for example, or can I not? Okay, then he says, я ведь только вошь убил. Okay, so I, after all, only a louse. Again, English speakers, we probably don't know this word, but a louse is the singular of those little bugs that get in your hair. Killed. Sonia is the girl that I showed you the picture of, his female friend, the prostitute. Бесполезную, a useless, гадкую, despicable, зловредную. This one literally means there's two word roots here. Evil, harm. So I would translate this as malicious. Malicious. Okay, so now let's go through and do the grammar. Смогу ли я? This is the perfective of мочь. So it's the ya conjugation. It means I will be able to, I can. Again, li, check back on my channel. Next week, I will have an entire video devoted to how to use this word li. Переступить. Переступить, we just talked about that. To step across, this is the infinitive. And if you're interested, it is also the perfective. Can I successfully do it? Или нет? Я ведь. This is a hard word to translate, but it does mean like after all. Только вошь, again, a real quick, interesting fact. Anytime you see a noun that ends in a mякизnak, if it has a husher, like a husher is a zh, ch, sh, ch, guess what? All of these are feminines. So if it has a mякизnak on the end, and right before the mякизnak is a husher, it's a feminine. Little life hack for you there. Okay? Хорошо. So, вошь убил. And by the way, this is accusative. Убил. This is the past masculine of убить. Okay, now we're getting a whole bunch of accusative case because вошь, as you remember, was a feminine. So we're getting a whole bunch of accusative case. Бесполезную. The original of this would have been бесполезная for a feminine. Гадкую. The original would have been гадкая. Зловредную. The original would have been зловредная. But they're all turning into accusative case because you did something to it, you killed it, and it was a feminine. So it changed. Okay? So what? So see this concept here. Is he so special that he can step across those lines, those social norms, and not get punished for it? Is he special, in fact? So again, remember the whole concept, the whole word, преступление, literally means stepping across. And you would only know that if you knew Russian. Pretty cool. Okay, хорошо. Следующий. Then at one point he goes down to the police station and starts getting kind of interviewed by the local detective trying to figure out who killed this lady. And he says this super funny line. So Raskolnikov is very obsessed with Napoleon and the idea that here's this man, he committed so many crimes, all these war crimes, and he, waged wars with a whole bunch of countries, but in the end, society was better because of him. Europe became enlightened and so on and so forth. So why is Napoleon so special that he gets to commit these crimes, but actually they benefit society? So he's talking, he kind of tells the detective this mentality that he has, and the detective says this funny line. He says, «Кто же у нас на Руси себя Наполеоном теперь не считает?» Okay, so let's go through word for word. «Ж» is really hard to translate. It just emphasizes who We're going to translate this phrase as here. It literally means by us or we have. Na Rusi. Now, if you guys know Russian history, Rus was the original land. It started in Kiev, and then it spread out to Moscow and Novgorod and stuff like that. But that's like kind of an old literary way of saying, like, here, who here in our civilization, na Rusi, in Rus, oneself. Napoleon, nowadays, doesn't consider. Okay, wow, crazy syntax here. Let's go through. Okay, so I would translate this line as, yeah, who nowadays in Rus doesn't think of themselves as a Napoleon? That's how I would translate that. But let's look at the grammar. So no change here. This is nominative. U nas. This is kind of how you can say here, but it literally means this is genitive case. And you've seen this before with having. У меня есть, у тебя есть, etc. На Руси, the original of this was Rus, and it's a feminine. And we're getting, but in this case, it's prepositional case because of the na. Okay, себя, this is accusative case because it's connected to this verb. They consider themselves. Okay, now, when somebody considers themselves something, the thing they consider themselves gets instrumental case. So we've got instrumental happening here because they consider themselves a Napoleon, and that's a masculine ending. Masculine. Okay, теперь не считает. The original of this verb is считать. It can mean to count. It can mean to consider. It can mean to think, etc. Okay, хорошо. Good. So that's a famous, again, Raskolnikov, the герой in this novel, thinks of himself as Napoleon. He thinks he should get away with crimes and that he's making society better because he killed his landlady who was greedy and a horrible person in his mind. So here's one of just a clever, famous quote by Dostoevsky. This one's really hard to translate if you don't know Russian well. So we're going to break it down here. So, человек он умный, но чтобы умно поступать, одного ума мало. Okay, again, without a knowledge of Russian, this one's hard to break it down. So let's break it down. This is Raskolnikov talking to his sister about the person she's supposed to marry. Okay, so he says, person, he is smart. So he's a smart person. He's a smart person. But, чтоб, in order to, умно, intelligently, and then поступать can mean to act or to behave. Okay, this is where it gets hard to translate. Один can mean alone. It can also mean only. Okay, so intellect alone, or only, let's do only intellect, very little. Okay, so this sounds so awkward in English, but this is how you would translate that. He's a smart person, but in order to act intelligently, you need more than just intellect. That's how you translate that. But it sounds much more clever in Russian, much more clever in Russian. Okay, let's look at the grammar here. So, человек, nominative, masculine. Он умный, nominative, masculine. Но чтоб, this is like, sometimes you'll see чтоб, and sometimes it's just a shortening of the word чтобы in order to. Умно, this is an adverb, and it comes from умный. When you see just o on the end, it can be an adverb as well. Поступать, that's just in order to. It's called the infinitive. Okay, and then here we go. We're getting genitive case right here. Genitive case because we have a quantity word, and quantity words need genitive case. Okay, so he has, or mala, just intellect alone is not enough. So mala, force is genitive case. The original of this would have been один. So numbers get cases as well. And then the original of this is Okay, and so this was a masculine to begin with, and that's why it's getting that ending. So that's a really hard one to translate, but it sounds very clever in Russian, harder to translate into English. Okay, let's look at the next quote. This is a very famous quote from Dostoevsky as well. It gets attributed to him, but it's actually from the book «Преступление и наказание». And if you ask me, it describes why Dostoevsky is such a great author as well. He had a hard life. As you know, he actually was poor most of his life. He very rarely had enough money to pay the bills. And that's because he had a gambling addiction. So he would sell his books and then use the money, gamble it away, be in debt to somebody, hurry and write another book, pay just enough to pay off his debts, get a little bit more, gamble that away. So he struggled with a gambling addiction his whole life. And he very much was what's the word? He suffered a lot in his life. But at the same time, he writes such beautiful literature. So I think this quote is very true when you're thinking about Dostoevsky as well. Okay. Страдание и боль всегда обязательны для широкого сознания и глубокого для широкого сознания и глубокого сердца. And then we'll just do that first page. But the quote continues, as you can see. So this is just the first part of the quote. So, страдание и боль. So, suffering and pain always are mandatory or required for a broad consciousness, I would say. If anybody has any other ideas on this, let me know how you would translate сознание, but I'm going to translate it as consciousness and deep heart. Okay, so let's go through and do the grammar. Страдание, this is a nominative. This is a neuter, and we know that because of the ye ending. Боль is a feminine, and it's in nominative here because it's the subject of the sentence. Обязательный. This is a short form adjective, originally from this adjective, and it's a plural here because it's referring to pain and suffering, the two things. Для, okay, so here we're going to be getting genitive case. So we've got the original was широкий. And here we're getting genitive case because of the preposition для. The original of this one was сознание. And again, we're getting genitive because для. Sorry. And then again, we're getting more genitive. So the original of this is глубокий. And we're getting genitive here because of для. And then the original of сердце was сердце, a neuter. And neuters behave just like masculines. Oh, спасибо, человек человеков. That's so funny. Да, so я понимаю, через сколько страданий пришлось пройти, чтобы выучить русский язык. Yes, a lot of suffering. And я до сих пор страдаю от русского языка. Очень сильно страдаю. А вы все видите на моих лайвстримах, вы видите, как я не знаю именно, куда ставить ударение или типа того. То есть, да, до сих пор русский язык мучает меня очень сильно. Okay, so that's the first part of the quote. It continues on. And the second part is actually the more famous part of the quote. Okay, so next part. And again, this is such a great representation of what Dostoevsky was like as a person. Истинно великие люди, мне кажется, должны ощущать на свете великую грусть. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this, if you can understand it. I think it's very true. All the most wonderful people I have known in my life have had a lot of suffering in their lives. Okay, so истина. Истина. Truly великие, great. Люди, people. Мне кажется, to me. it seems, should, должны, ощущать. This is a hard one. To translate, I'm going to say feel, ощущать, on earth, на свете, great, великую, грусть, sadness. So sad, but so true, right? Let me know if you agree with this topic or not. Again, the most brilliant people, in my opinion, are often the ones who feel the most sadness and who are the most prone to depression. Okay, хорошо. Let's go through and break this down. Истина. This comes from the word истинный. It's an adjective, but in this case, it's an adverb. And we know that because we just see the o. That is a good sign that it's an adverb in Russian. Великие люди. So the original of this was великий. And here we've got a plural going because люди is plural. Люди. Do you guys know what the singular of люди is? It's a totally different word. This happens in Russian sometimes where the singular, totally different than the plural. Ребенок is a child. Дети is children. Человек is a person. Люди is people. Очень интересно. Okay, мне кажется, this is dative case because of the to me, dative case. When something's happening to you or for you, we're going to get dative case. Кажется, the original of this verb was казаться. Казаться. Мне кажется, great phrase. If you're learning Russian, you got to know this phrase. Мне кажется. Well, it seems to me, I think, yeah, like that's my opinion. Мне кажется, так. Должны. This is a short form adjective. The original would have been должен, должна, etc. And this is getting a plural because it's referring to people. Ощущать, this is just an infinitive verb. Nothing fancy happening here. На свете. Okay, this is getting, the original was свет, and it's getting prepositional case because of na, which forces prepositional case. Okay, now they're doing something to the sadness, and it's a feminine. It's a feminine. So we're going to put it into accusative case. You're feeling the sadness. It's getting accusative case because you feel the sadness. Okay, so the original of this, as we just had it up here, look, we had it right here. So the feminine would have looked like this, великая, but we're putting it into accusative because you're doing something to it. You're feeling it. And грусть is feminine. So it's a feminine and it's getting accusative case because of ощущать. Again, so let me know in the comments, do you believe that that is true? That истинно великие люди, мне кажется, и мне Достоевскому кажется, и мне тоже кажется, должны ощущать на свете великую грусть. That's a very famous Dostoevsky quote, comes from Crime and Punishment. Okay, and then lastly, okay, I want to illustrate for you guys. This is what makes Dostoevsky hard. Look at this. This is all one sentence. Okay, don't want to like scare you too much. This is all one sentence. Look at that. And this is at the end of the book. It's like the second to last line of the end of the book. I'm not going to give away how he does this, but I want to emphasize to you that the whole concept of переступить, stepping across, Raskolnikov, he steps across from being a normal member of society and steps across to committing a crime. Then Crime and Punishment is just as much a story of crime and punishment as it is redemption. In the end of the book, he finds redemption. How he finds it, you'll have to read the book to find out. But he steps across, once again, from being a criminal to being redeemed. Again, that concept of переступить, it got lost in translation in English. But in Russian, he steps across when he commits a crime, and he steps across again when he repents for the crime. Очень интересно. Вот. Такой великий, могучий русский язык. Okay, so let's do it. Now we're going to go through this. Don't be intimidated. We'll break it down one by one. All right, here we go. Но тут уже начинается новая история. История постепенного обновления человека. История постепенного перерождения его. What else? Keep going. постепенного перехода из одного мира в другой, знакомства с новой, доселе совершенно неведомой действительностью. Okay, that's a very Dostoevsky sentence. Let's break it down. Хорошо. But here, now, kind of already начинается, starts, or is starting, depending on how you want to translate it. Новая, new. История, yes, this can mean history, but in this context, I'm going to translate it as story, right? Now starts a new story. A story постепенного, gradual, обновление, renewal. See, we can see that word root right there. Новый, новый. Renewal. Человека. We've seen that one before. Человека, person. But there's an of in here. Renewal of a person. A story of, I'm forgetting all my ofs. Historia of. Gradual. Rebirth, пере, means to do something again. It can also mean to do something again. We have a word like рождение, birth. When you say your birthday, мой день рождения, you're literally saying my day of birth. So, rebirth. His. Так. Okay, so let's just do this first page right here. So, here we go. Grammar time. Но тут уже начинается. This is the imperfective of the verb начинаться. Новая, that's feminine, and it's nominative case because it's the one doing the verb. Okay, история, again, feminine, nominative case. Again, same thing, feminine, nominative case. Okay, now we're going to start getting some cases. There is an invisible of right here. And of gets genitive case. So we're getting genitive. This is a genitive masculine ending. The original of this was постепенный. That was the original. And then once you put it into a genitive masculine, it goes to this. Обновление. This was a genitive neuter to begin with. And the original was обновление. Обновление. Ye goes to ya in genitive case. Then there's another of in here. This is what makes Dostoevsky hard, is the of. There's so many ofs. I can't remember the word for it in Russian, but it's like when things are, it's like a chain, you know, genitive, you have to kind of follow the chain. What connects to what? Okay, so of the original, this is a genitive masculine. And the original was человек. Okay, история, I'm not going to repeat that. Постепенного, same thing again, genitive masculine. Перерождение. Okay, the original of this was перерождение, a neuter. So we're getting genitive neuter because there's also an of. There's an of. Story of gradual rebirth. Of what would be of his gradual rebirth. Okay, so let's do this and let's try and make this sound good in English. So, and now here starts a new story, a story of gradual renewal, the story of a gradual renewal of a person, the story of his gradual rebirth. Okay, and then the second part, again, this is all one sentence, just FYI, this is all one sentence. This is a very Dostoevsky sentence. Okay, we've got постепенного again. Hopefully you remember now this is a genitive masculine because there's an of. And of needs genitive. So of a gradual, пере, meaning across, just like переступить, and ход, meaning go. So переход, how would I translate? It can mean a crossroads, or it can mean crossing, a crossing. So, oh, shoot, I'm doing this wrong. So gradual, I got too excited to do the grammar. Gradual crossing from one world into another. Знакомство. Transition. Yes, thank you, Alexei. That's much better. Transition. I like that much better. Знакомство, acquaintance with a new. Oh, this is a fun word. You don't really see this in modern Russian. Doселе means up until now, up until here. Ooh, metamorphosis there and beyond. Wow, that's very poetic, very beautiful. Metamorphosis. It would be interesting. You guys should comment, like, official English translations that you have read. How did they translate this word? Переход. Мне интересно вот. Okay, досель. Again, this doesn't write. They don't use this in modern Russian speech, but in olden times, сель would have meant like a point. Right? A point in time or like a point in place. So доселе, up until this point. Fancy word for this in English is hitherto. A new hitherto, completely, совершенно, неведомую. This means unknown, действительностью, reality. Again, if you don't agree with my translations on these, please let me know in the comments. Like действительность, that might be a hard one to translate as well. Okay, so let's do the grammar. It's got a bunch of genitive case still going here. The original was переход. And the reason we keep getting all these genitive cases is because there's ofs, right? So переход, and this here is a masculine genitive. Is forces genitive case. So we're going to see another genitive ending. The original of this was один. And we're getting masculine genitive. The original of mir, which hopefully you guys know that one, is mir. That was a masculine genitive again. And that's because is 100% of the time forces genitive case. В другой. Okay, so this one is accusative, but it doesn't change because it's a masculine and it's not an animate object. Okay, знакомство, again, we've got an of here, so we're getting genitive, and the original was a neuter, and that would be знакомство. Neuters look like genitives as well when they go. Okay, okay, finally, we're going to get something other than genitive case. Okay, for those of you who don't read a lot of literature, you're going to see feminine instrumental endings often go to oyu. That's a very, and in fact, in modern day Ukrainian, that's still how you do feminine instrumental, is with the oyu, zimnoyu, samnoyu. That's very poetic. It's very old Russian. Okay. So nowadays, this would be novoy. It would look like that. But in Old Russian, you had oyu. And sometimes you hear it in music too, even in modern music, okay? So the original of this was novaya, and we're getting feminine instrumental. Feminine instrumental because of the with. So a new acquaintance with a new, hitherto, there's no fancy grammar here, hitherto, совершенно, this is from the adjective совершенный. And again, we see just that o tells us it's an adverb. Tells us it's an adverb. Совершенно, completely неведомый. And we're getting feminine instrumental, and we're getting that fancy old instrumental ending again, the oyu. That's, don't confuse it with uyu. Uyu is accusative, and oyu is instrumental, old school instrumental. Okay, now big huge word here. Did you know that when feminines end in a mягкий знак, in instrumental they get a u, and you keep the mягкий знак. Okay, so you've seen this before in phrases like с любовью. С любовью, with love. Okay, so feminines that end in a mягкий знак, when they get instrumental, they get a u, ending. So that's going to be true for, in fact, one of the most common words you learn when you first start learning Russian is ночью. Times of day get instrumental case. So you had been saying that. You were putting a word into instrumental case, maybe even before you knew what instrumental case was. Okay, so here we have a feminine instrumental case that gets something that looks very different because of the mягкий знак. The original of that was действительность. And quick little life hack about gender of things ending in mягкий знак. Anytime you have this ost ending, it's a feminine. Only exception is the word гость. That one is a masculine. Okay? Вот. Okay. Это была нелегкая работа. That is not an easy thing to translate Dostoevsky, to pick apart his grammar. But I hope that makes you excited. That geez, if you learn enough Russian, you really can understand Dostoevsky. So in conclusion, let's read this whole giant Dostoevsky quote. We ready? But here starts a new story, the story of a gradual renewal of a person, the story of his gradual rebirth, his gradual transition, spasiba, Alexei, his gradual transition from one world to another, of his acquaintance with a new, up until now, hitherto completely unknown reality. And I will leave that as a cliffhanger. If you want to know how he is able to переступить, how he is able to cross over into this new life, you got to read the book, because he is a bit of a jerk and a douchebag in the beginning part of the book, and I just can't stand him. And then in the end, he changes and he becomes a wonderful person, all through the help of a certain thing. So let me know in the comments, what are your favorite Dostoevsky books? Who are your favorite Russian authors? Would you like to see me do this with Chekhov, for example, Tolstoy, Gogol? Who would you like to see me analyze like this? Who's your favorite Russian author? What's your favorite Russian book that you've ever read? And for those of you who are learning Russian, what's your dream? Like, if you could read something in the original Russian, what would make you so happy to be able to read it in the original? Chekhov, I love reading Chekhov in the original. He is delightful. Nabokov, he's very difficult to read in Russian, but Nabokov is the person that got me interested in the Russian language. So I'm forever in his debt. I love Russian language благодаря Nabokovu. Так. Мой православный мир says Idiot. It's a beautiful book. Also, there's a beautiful a show, how do you say that? TV series based on Idiot. Oh, the acting is gorgeous. You can find it in Amazon Prime as well with English subtitles. Okay, хорошо, это все. I'm so glad I got to share with you my love for Russian literature. I hope to do more like these in the future. Let me know in the comments what other stories or poems you would love to see me do. Хорошо, это все. До свидания.